The 7 Stages of Spiritual Alchemy, a step-by-step guide. Spiritual alchemy is a practice that utilizes the ancient occult practice of alchemy as a metaphor to facilitate inner transformation and spiritual awakening. Spiritual alchemy is an ancient practice aimed at achieving spiritual rather than material transformation. On the other hand, the occult science of physical alchemy deals with chemistry, and specifically the transmutation of base metals such as lead into gold. Alchemy was practiced by individuals seeking to attain material wealth and those who sought a universal elixir for immortality, the Philosopher's Stone. Spiritual alchemy then uses the ancient wisdom of alchemy as a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment through a 7-step process that aligns with the 7 steps of physical transformation described in alchemical treatises. What are these essential steps? Stage 1. Calcination. Calcination, the first stage of spiritual alchemy, is also known as the black stage. The color black represents chaos, that which is hidden and buried, and the material of the unconscious. It also refers to the materia prima, an idea in occult science that all matter in the universe emerged from an original primitive base. Calcination refers to the burning of the materia prima until it transformed into ashes. In the spiritual sense, it refers to breaking free from our worldly attachments, the desire for status and wealth, and the need to solidify our identity. It's not to say these things are wrong, but according to the process, the development of a higher level of consciousness and the refinement of the spirit are hindered by these attachments. Calcination also refers to the burning off of all of the superfluous elements of ourselves that no longer serve us. We are purified by fire. The hardened and dead parts of ourselves have burned away. All that has calcified within us is removed in a similar manner to how hardened plaque builds up on teeth and can be removed. Our preconceived notion about our identity and our limiting core beliefs are put to the test in the calcination stage. Our ideologies and neuroses begin to lessen their grip on the persona, enabling the spiritual alchemist to stop self-sabotaging behavior and take the first steps towards awakening. The calcination stage has been likened to the dark night of the soul. This 16th century poem describes the journey of the soul to unification with God, whereby our former worldview is dismantled and we undergo an existential crisis. The beginnings of spiritual development are typically arduous, as our former ties of identification are no longer valid and we become face to face with the void. Stage 2. Dissolution. The second stage of spiritual practice involves dissolving the ashes in the water. Water could be interpreted as a symbol for the unconscious, which contains the hidden parts of ourselves that we have been afraid of and, up until now, have not been explored. Dissolution can be understood as the stage in which we free ourselves from our inauthentic and acquired sense of identity. In medieval alchemy, dissolution refers to the dissolving of solid materials such as salt dissolved in water that can be understood in Jungian terms as the dissolution of the ego. Since the dissolution stage takes water as its symbol, it is also associated with intense emotions, as water often symbolizes the reservoir of emotions within. The dissolution stage involves the outlet of repressed emotion from traumatic events that we push down into our psyche. It can be a very cathartic step as we free ourselves of past painful experiences and self-doubt to start the process of emotional healing. Stage 3. Separation. In the separation stage, the pure essence is extracted from the rest of the mixture. As the first two stages were associated with fire and water, separation is related to the air element. In a spiritual sense, it can be understood as the separation from one's habitual thought processes or emotional trigger responses, allowing us to step back and distinguish our essence from our acquired personality. Separation is a very liberating stage where we can free ourselves of resentment toward others and ourselves. It is a kind of inner liberation from negative emotions. By doing so, we can become aware of our true feelings. We separate ourselves from our inauthentic selves and step closer to our essential or higher self. The separation occurs when we no longer identify with the character we have been playing, but rather become the awareness itself. We have conscious awareness of our own thoughts, feelings and desires, but without identifying with them or becoming attached to them. The separation stage is a kind of detachment from our old skin. After the emptiness and suffering in the first stage of calcination, and the fearful stage of dissolution, where hidden emotions emerge, the separation stage becomes as a welcome relief as we experience the stillness of being separated from our inferior and inauthentic qualities. Stage 4. Conjunction. Conjunction refers to the process of combining the elements from the previous three stages. In a sense, what we see what still remains within us, which is of value, and then begin to combine these elements to form one authentic spiritual self. After the first three stages of purification by fire, water and air, our disparate elements are brought together under the earth element. We begin a process of embodiment as spirit begins its process of materialization. We begin to feel unified in body and soul, but we are still drawing together the different strands of our true self, and we are not yet finished. Polarities cease their conflict and come together, such as male and female, body and soul, spirit and matter. Harmony is achieved between the different elements of our being. The attributes typically associated with divine feminine energy, such as intuition and emotion, unify with those attributes conventionally associated with the masculine, such as intellect and logic. Stage 5. Putrefaction, fermentation. Putrefaction or fermentation is the fifth stage and describes the decay of one's old self and the rebirth of one's true self. The first four stages involve discarding our old, inauthentic self and drawing together the authentic elements within us. At this stage, however, we catch a glimpse of a more refined, authentic self. This stage can be likened to the rebirth of the phoenix from its own ashes. The process can be split in two, putrefaction and spiritualization. Putrefaction is the rotting away of our former selves as the superfluous is let go. Putrefaction can be a difficult stage and can involve strong feelings of depression or despair, since we fear losing our identity, which is associated with our old self. Spiritualization, meanwhile, gives great relief as we begin to see the world in a new and luminescent way. It involves letting go of those parts of ourselves that no longer serve us in our present life, and as a result, the step can be accompanied by blissful feelings of inner peace and contentment. Stage 6. Distillation. The distillation stage is the stage when all of the impurities are removed and there is nothing left but the essence. In chemistry, distillation involves boiling and condensation to separate components, and it's commonly used in desalination. A liquid is boiled until it evaporates, and as the steam condenses, the essence is liberated from the matter. It marks the point at which our essence becomes spiritualized. In other words, in spiritual alchemy, distillation is a metaphor for the actualization of one's spirit. In Jungian terminology, this stage also involves the assimilation of any shadow aspects into our true self. It is the distillation of one's true self and represents a step up in consciousness as our core identity is freed from any inferior elements. At this stage, the ego has ceased dominating behavior as we begin to hear the voice of our soul. It also marks the point at which the conscious and unconscious aspects of the self are brought into harmony. Stage 7, coagulation. The final stage on the spiritual journey is coagulation, which describes the process of solidification where one's essential self becomes whole. Coagulation refers to the process by which liquid, typically blood, solidifies. It occurs when we are cut to form a scab. In spiritual alchemy, coagulation involves a solidification of our true self and can be likened to healing from a wound, as if we feel ourselves to be independent and complete. Coagulation involves the complete unification of polarities, spirit and matter, body and soul, masculine and feminine, to form a single whole. In this final stage, one's higher self emerges, and it can be likened to the point where gold cools and solidifies. This piece was written by Thomas Ellison, MPhil English Literature.